Hi there, I'm Linda and this is Hunts Valley Permaculture. Just here is my bottom swale and it's time to do some maintenance work. In today's video we're going to be doing some harvesting, pruning and planting. The swale was dug in 2019 and planting occurred sort of over the following year. Most of this is actually support species grown for diversity, mulch, some of them support pollinators, and there's also resources that we can harvest from here as well. The plan today is to start at one end and move right down to the other end, harvesting, pruning and planting. And I'm going to start here with my walnut tree, which has been in the ground for about 3 years, but I haven't done any pruning on it as yet. So today I'm just going to tweak it a little bit and make sure that it's growing well for in the future. Now I've got a good solid cage around this walnut tree to save it from my cows, which I really should have around most of my trees. Now all we're going to do is cut off branches that are sort of poking into the middle or crossing over, or just these ones down the bottom that I'll tidy up so that it mostly sort of grows from up here. The other trees that I've got around here are the Acacia trees, which flower in winter. So I'm not going to be trimming those or harvesting the biomass at the moment, but I'll wait till they're finished flowering and before they've gone to seed. And then I'll be mulching all of this area, which is still quite grassy. I haven't done a lot of mulching around this walnut as yet, and that's why I've planted these trees. These trees were actually a later planting compared to this larger Acacia tree here, which is why they're still sort of small, but it won't be long until we're harvesting a heap of mulch from these 3 trees. Now just next to that walnut and the Acacia is the area where I filled in my swale blowout, and we've got the lupin growing really well. It hasn't been warm enough for any of the sunflower seeds to be taken off, but hopefully there's still some there and the ducks haven't eaten them all. I do have some vetiver grass which is struggling to take off. I'm crossing my fingers on that one, that when the warmer weather comes that might start to grow, and just the roots will help to support the soil in this repair work. Moving along the swale, once again we're just going to leave the Acacia trees for the moment. This one isn't quite in flower yet, but it's coming. It won't be too much longer. But hiding in past this Acacia, we've got my second walnut tree, which once again I haven't done any maintenance pruning or shaping pruning on it at all. So we're just going to do a little bit of that here today. You can see there's some branches coming through right from the bottom, which I'd like to remove, these couple. And there's sort of quite a large one coming off here, so I'm going to be removing that. Now what I might do is just do a quick prune of this branch here, just to give the walnut a bit more space to grow when it starts to leaf up in spring. There we go. And I'll just chop this up a bit so that we can lay it around the walnut tree. And now what I'd like to do is increase the diversity of the plantings in this area. And to do that, I'm going to take some cuttings and grab some roots of some of the plants that are already growing in my gardens, and that is elderberry, comfrey and Jerusalem artichokes. Now those 3 plants will grow happily near a walnut. You do have to be careful what you choose to plant near walnut trees, but those ones should do okay. They do have to compete a little bit with the grass and the buttercup, so we'll see how they go with that, but I'm going to give it a try. This is the mother elderberry plant that I have. All my elderberries have come from this one plant that I got first. Today I'm going to take some cuttings. Now probably softwood cuttings would work best, but it's early in the season and they're not very big at this point. So I'm just going to lop off some of the harder wood and trim that up and throw that in the ground and see if it works. I can always come through and grab some softwood cuttings later in the season if I remember. That's always the key. But for the moment, I think that should do the trick. So for the moment, I'm just going to trim this branch off here and leave this little one to grow on, but that should give us plenty for our cuttings. Just here is a patch of Jerusalem artichokes that's been growing on my top swale. And I'm just going to grab some of these roots and add it to my walnut area, because Jerusalem artichoke is fine next to walnuts. Just grab a pile of these and we'll get some new plants growing. See, the new stalk should grow from that point there. And you can see how far it all goes down. Once you've got Jerusalem artichokes in a place, you've got it forever. All right, I think that pile should be enough to get some plants going in our bottom swale. Now let's go and grab some comfrey roots. Just here on the edge of my kitchen garden, I've got lots of comfrey growing, and I often just dig up some of the roots to spread it around my swale. So that's what we're going to do today for our bottom swale. I've got my fork here and we're just going to break some of these plants apart. I've just done a bit of a trim of all the buttercups that's growing here, so it looks a bit messy at the moment, but trust me, there is some comfrey hiding in amongst that. All right. There we go, plenty of roots to spread around in our bottom swale. And checking down in the hole, you can see, somewhere in there, that bit there is enough to start a new plant in this spot. Well, there's quite a few bits actually. I'll just fill that in again and pop some mulch over the top of that. So all I think I'll do is pop the elderberry sort of around the outer perimeter and some Jerusalem artichokes through the middle and perhaps the comfrey lining the swale. I have tried comfrey lining swales before and the grasses really were a challenge, but the roots are free and there's plenty of them, so I'm just going to keep trying until one day they take off. Now with my comfrey, I'm just going to sort of divide that into say 4, so that there's a really decent amount of root to sort of get these plants going. You can just grow comfrey from really small bits, but that's in areas where, you know, the soil's probably a little bit better and it doesn't have the grass challenges. So I'm going to give it a really big piece just to give it the best chance of starting to grow. All right, I think that might do it. That one broke off, so we'll put that in separate and just put those 3 pieces in and see what we end up with. This does have a top to it, so we'll keep that at the surface, and basically I'm just going to squish that in there, stomp on it a bit, and likewise with this one. Just going to place that like that. And I can just bury this one completely because there's no top to it. And what these tufts of grass are good for is acting as a bit of mulch. Well, we'll see if we get that comfrey going. And like the comfrey, I'm just going to dig little holes and throw the roots into the ground. Doesn't look like much, but I have dotted all of those Jerusalem artichokes around in this area, so we might get a nice stand of flowers come autumn. Now to plan where to put these elderberry cuttings. I do have a couple of little currants just in the front there. I do have to be mindful that I do have to chop a lot of this tree down, and also those other little Tagasaceae, sort of in spring, probably early spring. So I don't want these cutting squash, so I will try and plan for that a little bit with my placement. I might even just sort of place out a bit further here, so they're kind of on the edge of the future drip line of the walnut. Remembering that this tree will be completely removed once that walnut is quite large and the soil's improved and all of this will be under control. Some elderberries kind of around this area here might be lovely. So I'll just start with clearing some spots for these cuttings. All right, so I'm just going to trim these and get them into the ground. The ground's pretty soft, so hoping I can just make it a hole with a stick here. Yep. I'll get that in there and do that. Now I might just trim some of this top growth off to give it a bit of a chance, and I'll see how that goes. I'll just get some mulch around it as well. And because it's pretty hard to see, I'll be marking them each with some sort of stick. All right, that's that one in. So I've staked each of them. I've got 4 in, 1 here, 1 over there, here, and just there. Hopefully they'll get started, but I'll be keeping an eye on them, keeping them watered, and add some softwood cuttings if they don't seem to be taking off. Now while I'm here in the swale, I'll just mulch this elderberry, which I actually started from a plant that I'd rooted already. I just put them into water until the roots grew, and then I've planted them out. I actually did 2, but the other one failed, but this little guy took off. So I'm just going to give it a bit of this grassy mulch next to it, just to help improve the soil and make sure that it's got plenty of moisture going into summer. It also helps to control some of these grasses next to the plant as well. Moving along the swale, we get to where my macadamia trees are, and they're surviving this mild winter really well. I have another elderberry here. I did plant some elderberries as support plants for the macadamias as well, with the idea that they will grow up quite quickly, and while these ones are slowly growing, they should protect them sort of from the frost is what I'm most worried about with them. But I've done this structure here which keeps the cows off and the frost off, so they're looking pretty happy. But this should be quite tall when this is sort of beyond this structure, so should still help. And over the other side of the swale, I've got my other macadamia tree with its support elderberries, which are really starting to kick in there. They've grown very well since I planted them. Well, not that long ago really, maybe a year ago. So really happy with the progress of my macadamias, and it was really well worth putting in the effort to give it that bit of extra protection. Moving along now to the middle of my bottom swale, I have a Robinia Pseudoacacia. Now I'm not sure what variety it is. I did buy what I thought were 12 freesia varieties at the start, but this one turned out to be different to all the rest. It's got a lovely pink flower that comes out in spring, and it's really quite a good tree. And what we're going to do today is a bit of a harvest from this tree. We're going to pollard it, which means cutting it up high, and then I'll be using some of these lovely long branches for bean trellising in my front yard. It's a beautiful day today, and all my bees are out buzzing around these Tagasaceae flowers, which is why we're not going to harvest any mulch from them today. But I am going to harvest some of the biomass from these acacias, which are growing really tall. I want to chop them off quite high and get that top section down and just leave the bottom section to grow on, because it'll be easier to harvest mulch from that in the future. Now they're not flowering yet, they kind of flower later in the season, and there's a lot of native flowering wattles all along the creek of this variety. So my bees have got plenty to feed on when the flowering season does kick in for this plant. So I'm not too worried about chopping this down now. So we're going to make a start on this Robinia, which I have cut once before. You can see here I've chopped it off at this point, and this is all regrown. I have chopped it up a little bit higher as well, but today I think I'll take that out, and then take this one out and sort of see how we go. I'm still a little bit nervous about pollarding these completely because I have lost trees before, but we're going to do that and just see what regrows. I've got a bit to get through today, so I'm going to use a chainsaw. This one's my battery operated one, which I like to use for sort of small jobs like this. I do have a petrol chainsaw as well for those larger jobs, but I like to use this one because it is a bit lighter for me and sort of a bit easier. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to start with this branch here. Okay, so this is my harvest from this tree. These make really good stakes for your garden, and what I'm going to do is tie a few of these together to make a few bean teepees in my front veggie garden. You do have to watch because they are quite sharp in places, but you know, if I have to tie some strings around, that will hold it all in place beautifully. So I'm going to pile these up and I'll get them out to the front garden a bit later. These stakes also make great markers for any plantings you've done, or providing support for trees when you've planted them if needed. The tricky part when cutting branches down like this is to try and miss some of the surrounding trees that you've planted, but I think we did a pretty good job. Now, I was going to sort of hesitate and go easy on this tree, but I think I'll just whip it off there and get that final branch out and just have it as my test case. I've got about 10 or 11 other Robinias that I haven't done this to. I found that this one does grow a lot more vigorously than the other Robinias. So I'm going to give it a go. Luckily we missed that little tree there. Look how fantastic these posts are. They're going to be really useful out in my garden. Well, there's a few good bean poles here. I'll be tidying these up when I go to plant some beans in my front garden or when I'm getting the garden ready. So I'll be sure to show you what I do with all of these. But let's get on with the rest of the harvest. Next up, I'm going to chop some of my acacias. There's 5 in around this little tree here, and I'm just going to lop the top out. I don't want to chop them right off because it would probably kill the tree, which I've done before, but I do want to just lop it off high, and then it should sprout from there, and I can just keep chopping it off high each time when I want to harvest some of the mulch. Oop. Done. These trees are still fairly young trees, so there's not a lot that comes off them when you take the top off like that, but given a few more years, that tree should provide heaps of mulch for the surrounding plants. I like to think of it in terms of a harvest because when you're doing chop and drop, it is a bit of hard work. But if you're getting rewards at the end of it, it just makes the whole process a lot more joyful. Harvesting the mulch and putting it around the plants to benefit the system really makes it all worthwhile. There are some small plants in this area that I do have to be mindful with all my trimming and where all the branches lay, but so far so good. Now to decide what to do with all the prunings. I do have a couple of apple trees in this area, but I've got a lot of Tagesaste that I'll be harvesting in spring. So I'm going to use the Tagesaste to really thickly mulch my apple trees. Today I'm going to actually chop up those branches fairly small and put it around some of my young plantings in this area. They're a bit hard to spot at the moment, being winter and not in leaf, but I do have 2 blackcurrant plants here, which are definitely in need of a bit more identifying and a bit of mulch. So I'm going to start getting some of this mulch around these 2 plants. All right, that ought to do it. Now it's a good opportunity to get in and give these plants a bit of extra help, just clearing some of these grasses. This one's kind of lost its marker, so I'll put that one back again because it did get a bit lost. That one's much easier to spot now. I have reserved some of these branches because next I want to transplant some rhubarb underneath my apple tree. This rhubarb here is in my kitchen garden and has never been split and is actually not as vigorously growing as this one over here, which I have split and had about 15 plants off. So today, while I'm not going to dig it all up, I am going to just take a few little crowns from out of here. I do have a video on splitting rhubarb, one of my original videos, so I'll leave a link to that. But that's all we need to transplant one of these rhubarbs. So I'll just take that one and see what else we've got in here. All right, that's a nice little plant actually. I'll remove kind of these from it. It was about and that will transplant really well. This I'll remove these stalks and just leave this little leaf on it. And this one I'll probably just split through the middle. I'll leave quite a bit on there just so that it has a better chance of taking off in its new location. Okay, I've just put my spade through the middle and that'll give me 2 plants. There we go. Now I've just filled in the hole again with a bit of soil and mulch and made sure all of those roots are covered up. And having a look at that plant, you'd never even know there was a little bit of it gone. And over here we have 4 little rhubarb plants that I'm going to put into my swale. This can go to the kitchen, and just down there will end up as mulch. So we've got our little rhubarb plants. Now it's decision time. Where are we going to put them? So having a look around near my apple tree, I don't want it too close because it'll get in the way of pruning or netting or harvesting. So I need it out a little bit. These trees are all support trees, so their function is just to grow mulch for the system and provide nitrogen once they're chopped down. And the leaves will also provide nitrogen to the soil too, just as a mulch. I'm thinking we might pop these through the middle here. I'll have these chopped down, and then as the sun gets higher in the sky, I think these little rhubarb plants will get plenty of light. Right, let's have 4 rhubarb in the ground. I'll just give them a water and get some mulch onto them. My cows have left a few deposits nearby, so I'm going to use that as a bit of a mulch before adding my acacia to these little plants. Now I'll make sure that it's not right up against the plant, but just kind of around the outside of it. We've now arrived at my final apple tree, the one nearest the dam, and we do need to do a little bit of clearing of some of the volunteer acacias around this tree, just to give it some space and make the most of that mulch as well. And this is my little apple tree that's struggled in the soil it's had. It started off in a heavy clay soil and we're hoping to improve it. I do have a couple of little rhubarbs next to it which have also struggled, but it's starting to feel a lot better in this area, and you can see the colour of the soil is darkening, a good sign that it's increasing the organic content. And when spring comes and I can get all of these trees chopped and dropped and onto the soil, it will just help a whole heap more. But for the moment, I'm just going to work on all of these trees and get them chopped to the ground. But just sort of do them up at a height like before. I've just taken the tops out of most of them. There's still some tall branches and there's still some younger trees that I haven't kind of lopped off as yet. But hiding in amongst here is plenty of leaf and woody material that we can use to mulch all these trees. Now just here near my dam, I've got the same trees and they keep coming up all over the place. They grow huge, so I want to just lop them at this point, like all the rest of the trees in my swale, and start mulching this area through here. I'm thinking this might be a great spot for a few olive trees. This spot is just next to my dam overflow and it really doesn't get shaded. It's only shaded by these trees at the moment. So I think I can squeeze in 3 olive trees right here. We've got east out that way, and if we turn around, we've got north, and then we've got west, and the sun sets over there in summer. So I think this spot will get lots of good light and hopefully grow some beautiful olives. And just at the start of the food forest in this bottom swale, I think I'll plant another olive tree. So 1 here and 3 over there. I will be keeping this other area open. My tractor can drive through here and along around the dam, so keeping that access open is good, but it's also good for moving my animals around as well. I can create lanes through these systems too. Hello everybody. I've had to get out my petrol chainsaw for this. I kind of wrecked my battery chain actually. It's the next morning and another beautiful winter's day today. And I've been out here already just putting all of this mulch around my small plants. You can see here, here's a little plant. Now, often I don't actually chop the grass and put it down as mulch. Depends on the time I have. I'll just put all this mulch down over the grasses, and over time the grass just seems to disappear. I tend to go on about it a bit, but it's a really important thing. Forests grow on fallen forests. All this material represents the fallen forest, and that's what feeds the soil and changes the soil over time. This is a woody mulch, which is the preferred food for fungi. Now, it's a fungal dominated soil that our productive trees love and grasses don't, because their nitrogen feed is not available in the form of vegetation uptake. So over time, when you're increasing all this woody mulch, the soil changes, so the grasses don't grow, but it just supports your productive trees a lot more. So just keeping on piling this up on the grass, just be confident that the grass will slowly become under control without too much effort. Just here I've used the mulch not only just to improve the soil, but also to provide a bit of protection for this young plant. We do get a lot of cold air dropping down this slope, so it will help protect it from that. I mean, this is a fairly frost hardy plant, but I think if you can improve your growing conditions, you can get these plants taking off a little bit quicker. Now I have my olive tree positioned, so I've got my tree over in that corner near the dam overflow, which will receive plenty of sunlight all through the day. The fourth little tree I've got hiding over there in the shadows. It's in the morning at the moment, so that is quite shaded, but it will get plenty of afternoon sun, particularly come spring and summer. And once the soil's improved in this area, I'll be totally removing these trees here once they've completed their function of growing lots of mulch. We can remove those so that this tree will get lots of sunlight, and that's what it needs to produce plenty of olives. Now I'm just putting in some Kalamata olives, which you can use for oil or just as good eating olives. I do try and chop this coarser mulch down so it's sort of sitting flat on the ground, both to retain moisture better and also to stop the mulch drying out and becoming sort of more of a fire hazard. Another 3 olive trees in the ground. I want quite a lot of olive trees because it takes a lot of olives to get pressed into oil. It's only cost efficient if you do a lot. So I intend to get lots of these olive trees around so that we can get the beautiful olive oil, but also the wonderful eating olives. Now I've just got to get all of this tree trimmings next to all these little plants. Getting this low to the ground also helps when there's high winds to keep this on the soil surface. I'm pretty excited about this new olive grove. It was something I didn't even think about in my original design, this growing space. But I should be able to add in some rosemary or some lavender, some sort of Mediterranean type plants as a little olive tree guild down the track. In the meantime, I need to improve the soil, so I will be adding in some pioneer sort of species shrubs just to help improve the soil and get rid of these grasses. The grasses are kept in check by the ducks at this point, but I think I might just fence off this little section so that we can really get on top of it and get this little beautiful guild going. Already a bird over there checking it all out and enjoying the new planting. Well, that's all I'm going to be doing in the bottom swale for the moment. I'll leave a link to a video a couple of years ago of me planting out some of these plants, and you can see the change over those 2 years. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Thanks so much for watching, and bye for now.